All right, so we'll go ahead and get started at 6:30. So this is meeting number one for the SWA instructional meetings. For those who didn't get the emails, we're going to have 5 meetings this year. We're going to have 3 preseason meetings today, next 2 weeks, and then we'll have a mid-season meeting and a playoff primer. We'll have dates for that mid-season, the playoff primer, that'll go out later in the year. Real simple meeting outline today. We'll do introductions around the room, and the main focus for this first meeting is going to be the new rules. Quite a few of them came out from the NFHS, a lot of rules clarifications that we'll go over, and then points of emphasis. We got some repeats and a lot of stuff that we've seen in years past, some stuff that they want to continue to focus on. So my name's Andrew Martins. You've seen hopefully my name on the emails. I'm the basketball lead instructor for SWOA. I have my email address up there. If you have any questions, anything doesn't make sense from these meetings, you have any materials that you want to share, stuff from the NFHS or some of the other organizations around, absolutely appreciate you sending that stuff along. Let's go back a second. So let's go around the room quick. If you guys just want to say who you are, where you're from, how many years you've been officiating. Again, I'm Andrew. I live in Madison, and I've been officiating for about 15 years now. I'm going to start right here.
Kurt Easterday, teach in Argyle, a little out of the way. It's actually my first year doing it officially. Done it fill-in here and there when my school meets ref. So.
Wonderful.
Mark Novak, Madison area, been repping almost 30 years.
Nick Neds, Deerfield. Growing officials population in Deerfield, since 4. I've been doing this for 14 years, I think.
Josh Cash, Wanakee, 11.
Kevin Salmon, Middleton, also first year officially doing it.
Wonderful.
Juan Campbell, Forest, about 7 years.
Jeff Miller, DeForest, about 9.
Matthew Klutsky, Middleton, 14 years.
Jonathan House, Madison, 4 years.
Tim Olson, Oregon, 20-ish years.
Tim Shaw, Edgerton, been officiating basketball for over 30 years, here in Wisconsin for about 15.
Beth Firstel, live in Plain, Wisconsin, and this is my 4th year.
Xander Wietrek, live in Janesville, Wisconsin, roughly 7 years.
Thomas Gray, I live in Verona, and 11 years.
Brent Scott, Rio, 4 years.
Anthony Sell, Rio, 23 years.
I'm Charlie Olson from Madison, 5 years.
Curtis Kellman from McFarland, about 15 years.
Taylor DeVoe, Deerfield as well, 21 years on the Milwaukee Folsom.
Newly minted in Deerfield, right?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to jump in right with rule changes. Like I said, there were a large number of rule changes that came out from the NFHS this year, and a lot of these, in my opinion, are really, really good rule changes. They're going to help us officiate the game of basketball better, and it's going to improve the game of basketball that's happening out there. So our first rule is related to basket interference. So anyone who's dived in the rule book in the past is familiar with 10.44b. This concerns players striking the backboard, causing it to shake when a shot attempt is in flight. I'm sure all of us who have done boys high school basketball games have dealt with the coach complaining when someone goes up, block a shot, slap the backboard, it shakes, and the coach they're calling for goaltending, they're calling for basket interference. But all of us as officials know that there's really only one penalty here in the previous rule set, and that was a technical foul. And you had to interpret it as being some type of an unsporting act or an illegitimate attempt to play the ball. The reasoning from the NFHS for this rule change is that no one called 10.44b. It's too much interpretation there. You're going to have one coach who's happy, and you're going to have a really, really, really ticked off coach. So they have made the wise decision in the 25-26 rule set. They've moved this occurrence into the basket interference rule. So it's now basket interference if a player slaps the backboard, causes the backboard or ring to vibrate, and the ball is either on the backboard, on the rim, or is within the cylinder. There's a couple of key points in the way that rule is worded. It's not about the exact time that they hit the backboard anymore. It's about the timing of, does the ball reach any one of these situations while the backboard is still vibrating? Okay? So you could have a guy go up 5 seconds before a shot happens, hit the backboard, it's shaking, it's shaking, it's shaking. Someone goes in for a layup. As soon as that ball contacts the shaking backboard, we have basket interference. Right? What we want to have happen in the games is that the backboard, the ring, is not moving when shot attempts are occurring. So there is a long enforcement period for this rule. If you hit the backboard and it's shaking, it's shaking, it's shaking, I'm sure we've all been in some older gyms where the backboards move around a little bit. As long as it's still moving, this rule still applies. So if we talk about then sequencing on that. In the old rule set, you likely are going to rule a technical foul as soon as they hit the backboard on an illegitimate attempt to play the ball. In the new rule set, they're going to hit the backboard and you're going to wait. You're going to wait until one of the other conditions happens. Ball contacts the backboard, ball is on the rim, ball is in the cylinder. That's when the violation actually occurs. Guy could fake a shot, you slap the backboard and they kick it out and the backboard settles down. We don't have a violation there. So I'm gonna stress to all of you as you see these things happen in your games this season, patience. Patience is going to be key. We need to see what happens. We need to interpret what happens. And then when we know it rises to that level of a violation occurring, we can put air in the whistle. We don't want to put air in the whistle as soon as the backboard gets hit and we don't have a shot attempt, because you can't have basket interference if there's not a shot attempt. That's a requisite part of that rule. If you were to do that, if you were to hit your whistle as soon as someone hits the backboard and the ball is not in flight, what is the situation that occurs there? How would we adjudicate it? What would we rule? I heard someone back there. Inadvertent whistle. And so inadvertent whistle, we're going to go to our point of interruption, which hopefully is before the ball is in flight, and we can just give the ball to the offense underneath. But patience is going to be key in that scenario. There is a little bit of a caveat here. The NFHS has not fully backed off of 10.4.4b. They've left open a little bit of interpretation where if you rule that what they did in slapping the backboard is in no way a sporting act. So think about a situation where there's a layup happening on the right hand of the lane and someone slaps the left hand of the backboard. You can still rule a technical foul. It no longer falls under this 10.4.4b. It falls under placing your hand on the backboard to gain an unfair advantage. So just keep that in mind. You can still penalize that way if you see something that's egregious enough, but most of your cases are now going to fall under this new 4.6.2. Stay on top of it, because some coaches are going to be behind. They're not going to have any idea that this has changed. There are a lot of coaches out there that are going to know. They're going to know that this has changed because they've complained about it to officials in the past. Don't let this slip by you. It's a really easy thing to see happen. It doesn't even have to be, if they go up to try and block a shot and they miss and they hit the backboard and it vibrates, we're in the 4.6.2 regime. So it doesn't have to be anything, illegitimate attempt to play the ball or anything. And as far as interacting with the other coach, because the other coach is probably going to say, well, he was trying to block the ball. Fall back in your rule and say, coach, there's no allowance in that rule for a legitimate attempt to block the ball. He contacted the backboard, it caused it to vibrate, it affected the ball. We have basket interference.
So if I understand right, it's still a player technical foul.
No.
No, it's
No.
a personal foul.
It's not any foul, it is a violation. And that's the key reason that we have this rule reclassification is the player technical is that's a very high bar. If you're giving out a player technical, they're halfway to disqualification. That's why most people did not enforce 10.44B the way it was intended to be enforced. That's why they've lessened the penalty. It's a violation. You're going to score the basket if it's at the opponent's rim. If it's at the same team's rim, you can't have basket interference on the offense. Then we would wipe the shot off. No points can be scored. Okay?
Team gets the ball.
Yeah, and the other team gets the ball. Any questions, interpretations on this basket interference, Thomas?
Are you still determining if you think it affected the ball, or is it like they hit the backboard? It's over
If the backboard is moving, that is all that you need to determine. There's no need to determine the size of that impact if the backboard's moving. So there is a small amount of judgment there. Not every time that someone contacts the backboard is it going to vibrate, beyond a quarter of a second or a half a second. So you're going to have some situations where there's going to be a hand on the backboard on a missed shot, but if they didn't follow through, if they didn't cause a huge commotion, you also got to have that in your back pocket to explain to the coach on offense why it's not basket interference, because the backboard wasn't vibrating. So again, think about your key aspects, things that have to occur, right? A player has to slap or strike the backboard. The backboard or basket has to vibrate. If those things occur, then you could have basket interference. If the basket and the backboard aren't vibrating, you can't have basket interference even though a player has struck the backboard. So just keep that in mind when you're explaining to coaches. If you're not going to call it, know why you're not going to call it. Say, Coach, the backboard was not vibrating when the ball contacted it. Okay. Any other questions? Cool. All right, next big rule change, goaltending. Those of you who watch a lot of college basketball, this is going to be really nice. It's going to bring the rule sets closer together. So the minor change, they've decided that offensive players can't commit goaltending anymore. Part of the rationale for that is we were being forced to judge on whether a ball that was thrown towards the rim, whether it was a pass or a shot attempt, because technically speaking, on a shot attempt, the offense could goaltend. But if it was a pass, they wouldn't be able to goaltend. So they've removed offensive goaltending by just saying the offense can go up and they can get that ball in a position that would be considered goaltending. You don't have to judge whether it's a pass or whether it's a shot attempt. Makes it easier for us as far as determining whether goaltending occurs. But the big change here is Article 3. When the ball contacts the backboard, it's going to be considered to be in the downward flight. So this aligns with the NCAA men's rule that as soon as the ball contacts the backboard, it's in the downward flight. So it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to officiate. We're not going to be judging, layups when does a layup reach its peak and then it starts to come back down into the basket to figure out when we can start enforcing goaltending. It is, however, going to create some additional difficulties for us to officiate. We're going to have pin plays where you got a defender chasing down someone on a layup, and ball's going to be going up to the backboard, and we are going to have to judge whether that ball has contacted the backboard and then was blocked, or whether it was pinned off the backboard. And I guarantee you, anyone who works in the Big 8, anyone who works in the Badger, you're going to get this question. This is going to happen. You're going to have those chase down plays, you're going to have those pins, and coaches are going to expect an explanation. So again, understand the rule, understand what it is that you're seeing on the court so that you can articulate it accurately to the coach. Why wasn't that goaltending? Coach, he got there before the ball hit the backboard, pinned against the backboard. That's not goaltending. You see it in the NCAA, so you know that we're going to see it in the at the high school level. With these type of plays on chase downs, which of our three officials is going to have primary responsibility on those transition plays with a chasing defender? Where should that call come from 98% of the time? C. Yep. So don't rest on your laurels as C. You're going to have fast breaks, but we got a lot of athletic kids in high school basketball. So you have that transition play. You're like, it's one-on-one. The lead can officiate that. Get down there. Be in position to officiate this. The other 2% of the time, we might have a call for this type of play out of trail. Trail stays engaged. They might be taking a 6,000 foot view of the thing. They might be calling it from 60 feet. But if we know that it's goaltending, if it's obvious, if your grandma up in the 40th row knows that it's goaltending, we can have that call come in from that trail official. We really never should have that call coming from our lead official. Lead official, if they're in the right place, they can't see this play. So support each other as a crew. Know that your lead official is not going to make that call. He's going to catch crap if the call isn't made, because you know how coaches are, who they're looking at. Support your fellow officials. If it's goaltending, let's make sure we get that call, make sure it comes out of the C, or super backup comes out of the trail. All right. Any questions on this? Player bench personnel. Again, the NFHS is helping us do a better job of officiating. This rule change is very straightforward. They inserted the words during timeouts. So typically our players are the 5 legal team members on the court, except during intermissions. We've now added except during timeouts. So in situations where a timeout has been granted and the teams are crossing each other and some stuff starts to happen, you get to treat everybody involved in that as if they were bench personnel. You don't have to try and remember, who are my 5 players on the court? Or in a situation where there's a huddle for the timeout and one kid gets mouthy with you as an official, he disrespectfully addresses you and you issue a technical foul. You don't have to worry about, was that kid in the game? Was that kid not in the game? Bench personnel. So what do we do if we're issuing a bench technical? It gets charged directly to the responsible person. Who else does it get charged to? Head coach. And this is why this is important. This is why the rule changes happens, because the coach is responsible for those 5 players during the course of the timeout.
We're taking the box away, right?
Yep, you'd be taking the box away in that situation. So coaches are going to be, they're going to be incentivized to continue to control their kids during timeouts. This is stuff that's it's trickling down to us from the higher ranks, from the NCAA. The big thing in the NCAA with timeouts is making sure that the 2 teams are separated and that you don't allow mixing. This is just an extension of that, giving us those tools to make sure we can enforce anything that's happening during timeouts accurately. What situations are there where conceivably there could be a huddle but is not a timeout per the rule book? Free throw. So we could definitely have a huddle. Coach could pull players out of the lane, huddle during free throw. What other type of situations? Injury is a great one. Anytime that us as officials have to come together in order to adjudicate a play and we're sending the players back to the bench, those situations, they are still players. They are not bench personnel. So don't rest on your laurels. Make sure that if something is going to happen there, that we're adjudicating it correctly, that we're not enforcing a penalty for them as bench personnel. We're enforcing the penalty as if they were players. Okay. Last question, timeout interval. So when does the timeout begin?
And the official signals it to the table.
Spot on. When the official tells the table, timeout has started. Right, so you're going to do white coach, 30-second start. That's the start of the timeout. So you're going to have there's still a little bit of time there where you got players who are players and players who are bench personnel, and you're going to have to officiate that correctly. When does the timeout end?
When the ball's at the disposal of the thrower.
Yes. So it is not clock to clock. It's not start to horn. It's start of the timeout until we are ready to resume play. So I'm sure we've all experienced it. You got a kid who's a little bit fired up, and they're still chirping away as we come out of the timeout. Know what your period is, know that you're in a timeout, and enforce it correctly, and be able to explain it to a coach. Coach is not going to be happy that he's losing his box because a player out on the court decided to run his mouth. But that's the way the rule is written. We have to be consistent in that enforcement. Coaches will respond by making sure they control their players so that stuff doesn't happen. Again, it's a mechanism to help improve the game. It's giving us the tools that we need so that coaches will respond and understand what their role is in controlling player behavior. Any other questions on our player bench personnel definitions? All right, one that I'm a big fan of. So 2 years ago, we got our new designated spot throw-in. So there are the two locations when we're in the front court, the 3 foot on the end line, 28-foot mark on the sideline. Rule used to be that you...
Sorry to interrupt, but I think you skipped about if a player comes onto the court after, if you have 4 on the floor, if you go back to your previous screen. Oh, okay, never mind. I thought you talked about, never mind.
Oh, it's coming up. We'll get to it. So previously we had the trapezoid, right? Free throw line, where it intersects the lane line to the corner. Same thing the other side. Anything inside of that, you went to the baseline or the end line. Anything outside of it, you went out to the sidelines. They're really pushing away from imaginary lines. Imaginary lines are terrible. We're getting rid of them. So they clarified this. It's just the 3-point line now. So if the stoppage in action occurs on or within the 3-point line, we're going to take it down to the end line. If the stoppage occurs outside of the 3-point line, we're going to go out to our 28-foot marks. Okay? Really simple. I like that they did on the 3-point line takes you down. It's super simple. If a foot, the ball, anything is touching that line, we're going down to the end line. Makes it really easy for us to adjudicate that play. The other thing they changed here is that they have it applied to both the front court and the back court. Previously, anything that happened in the back court, we had a whole different set of rules for how to determine our nearest throw-in spot, and there were an infinite number of throw-in spots. Now, we just have the 4 spots in the front court, the 4 spots in the back court. There are 2 situations in which we wouldn't use a 3-foot spot or a 28-foot spot for inbound. Can anyone name what those 2 situations are? Thomas?
Out of bounds and technical foul.
Out of bounds and technical foul, exactly. So for technical foul, there's an added case, which is the inbound at the end or at the beginning of the second half. So those are designated half-court throw-ins or division line throw-ins. So all of your throw-ins are going to come from one of these 4 spots, except that the ball goes out of bounds or you have a designated division line throw-in, which would occur after a technical foul or after or to start the second half. So really simplified now. Find your spots. Hopefully teams now, schools are getting used to putting the X's so you can easily locate them. But everything's going to go to one of those, 8 spots plus our division line throw-in. That includes timeouts that are called during a live ball. We do not have the rule, I believe, in college where if you call a timeout after the ball's gone out of bounds, you can relocate it to the nearest mark. We don't have that. Once the ball goes out of bounds, you've established your throw-in spot, so a timeout doesn't change it. Any questions on new designated spot throw-ins? Pop quiz for everyone, because this is one of my favorite rules relating to this. Backcourt violations. Where is the inbound on a backcourt violation?
Front court, 28-foot
Doesn't matter for high school.
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. It is going to be front court at the nearest designated spot. So if the illegal touching for the backcourt violation happened here in the middle of the lane, we're going to go down to a 3-foot mark. If they just stepped on the division line, we're going to either 28-foot mark. I watch a lot of film. I watch a lot of high school officials work. A lot of officials still get this wrong. Hopefully with the new rule, they'll be less likely to get it wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised to see people inbounding at these 28-foot marks in the backcourt when we have a backcourt violation. Let's make sure that we're not doing that. We discussed it, we know what that rule is. We can make sure that when we show up on film, we're doing it right. All right, any other questions? Go ahead.
So if the backcourt violation happens within that 3-point section, so it's at the 3-foot line?
So yes, it would be a 3-foot. So that'd be a case where an errant pass gets thrown into the backcourt and the offense chases it down and touches it illegally somewhere within that 3-point line. We're going to go to the end line to the nearest 3-foot mark. Players legally out of bounds and returning. This is another case of we weren't enforcing the rule, so the NFHS made it easier on us. So previously, we added this rule maybe 3 or 4 years ago about players going out of bounds, coming back in, being the first to touch, that being a violation. There was a big loophole in that, and that was for players that are legally out of bounds. So that's a player that's either throwing in the ball or a player who in making a play on the ball has gone out of bounds. They are legally allowed to be out of bounds. But if they were to deceitfully delay returning, our enforcement mechanism was a player technical foul. And again, with those real high penalties, we had a really high bar before enforcing that rule. So the NFHS has reduced the penalty for this particular violation. So both for players who are legally allowed to be out of bounds, so again, players who are going after a ball, maybe after a layup and their momentum carries them out of bounds, that's legal, they're legally out of bounds. They cannot deceitfully delay returning, purposefully and deceitfully delay returning to the court. Same thing with the thrower. The thrower, after the throw-in ends, they cannot purposefully and deceitfully delay returning to the court. Now, what are some examples that you guys can think of that might fall into the bucket of, say, on a throw-in, purposefully and deceitfully delaying returning to the court?
Waiting for a screen on the court.
Waiting for a screen to develop, right. Any other situations that might occur? Think about a throw-in play where we're on the left side of the lane, we're throwing it into the corner, and then the thrower is going to try to get to the other corner. They're going to go around the horn. He's going to try and shoot a 3. If he runs along the end line, staying out of bounds, that's definitely purposeful, and I would argue it's at least a little bit deceitful in running that distance out of bounds. So that is pretty close to the definition that's laid out here. For players that are legally out of bounds, that might look like a player who goes off the end line to save a ball, and instead of returning directly to the court, maybe they decide to run out of bounds towards the opposite corner of the court. Again, to try and keep their defender behind them, run their defender through a screen, some way to gain an advantage. That would be a situation where we would probably want to enforce this. But again, not a player technical anymore, it's just a simple violation. Important, this goes back to the other rule that they put in a couple of years ago, and this rule as well. They have to be the first player to touch the ball once they've returned to the court. So if they get into that position, illegally, but the ball goes all the way, goes through 3 other hands before it gets to them, that's fine. What do you guys use typically for your mechanics for communicating that? So say that you're the lead official. How are you communicating that to your partners? Thomas, fist out there. That's a delayed violation. what I like to do is I follow that player. I see that they've illegally, gone out of bounds, returned to the court, and now I'm watching the ball to an extent. If I see that ball go into someone else's hands, you can drop it right away. The big thing is that that call is still going to come from you as the lead official. So you do have to keep your eye on the ball a little bit to understand what is its status when that player re-enters and are they the first to touch. But that call should be coming from whichever official is responsible for that boundary. Okay? Any situations where that people have had both, the way this rule might be applied or the way that the rule that we added 2 or 3 years ago has played out? Any situations you guys have come across that are, maybe questioned whether you got the right call or not? All right. That's it for the big rule changes, the things that are sort of rewriting entire sections. What's up next is the editorial changes. So these are going to be the changes that do affect how we interpret the game, but not to the point where they rewrote entire sections of the rule book. So the first one here, this 419.3c, clock manipulation is no longer an element of intentional fouls. So what are some of the categories that we have for intentional fouls? What things in the rule book are classified as intentional fouls? Go ahead and just shout them out.
Used to be trying to stop the clock.
Used to be trying to stop the clock, not anymore. Right, not making a legitimate attempt to play the player or the ball. Contact that negates an obvious advantage. So think about that as the chase down hold of the jersey on a fast break. Excessive contact. I think that's everything. Is there one I missed, Josh?
I think you got it.
Oh, contacting a player through the throw-in boundary. That one's definitional. So we took out clock manipulation. Clock manipulation, clock management, it is a part of the game. Coaches are going to foul in order to prolong the game, to have action happen when the clock isn't running. Coaches take timeouts to manipulate the clock. It really is a part of the game, and so fouling to stop the clock or prevent the clock from starting is now being recognized as a legitimate aspect of the game. Now, that does not negate any of the other aspects of intentional fouls. So a team can foul during a throw-in to prevent the clock from starting, but that foul needs to be a legitimate play on the player or on the ball. You can't just go and bear hug someone to prevent the clock from starting. That player's got to be making some kind of move and you restrict them or something like that. So make sure that we are that we're still communicating to players, that we're still telling them, hey, that you got to go for the ball a little bit more there. You're getting marginal. I might have to call an intentional foul. We play an important role in helping them understand the game and help them understand how to commit fouls in a legitimate way. All right. Warning for delay. So that's 447. So we have 5 things that can cause delay. I'm going to quiz everyone again. Can we name all 5 things?
Coming out of the timeout.
Coming out of timeout, and what's the important factor there when coming out of a timeout?
Being ready to play.
Being ready to play. Specifically, having the court ready to play.
Right.
Not passing the ball to an official immediately. I heard that one. Throw-in plane violation. Huddle on a free throw or delay on a free throw, yeah. And what's the last one?
Tapping the ball back to the official.
And we got that one already.
Tapping the ball away after a made shot.
Yes, tapping the ball away after the made shot. So the update to the rule is that we are supposed to put a warning for team delay when that action actually causes the game to be delayed in an appreciable way. So they've opened up a whole lot of judgment on our part. it was very, very easy to say that, you know, you're running a 30-second timeout, they bring water on the court, they spill water on the court, the second horn happens, they're cleaning up water, boom, delay warning, right? Because it's, you know, it was solid, there was no judgment there. They have now added an aspect of judgment that the action needs to be deemed to have caused a delay to the game. So out of those 5 situations that we mentioned, I would venture that 4 of them are judgment and 1 of them is automatic. Anyone want to guess what the one automatic one is going to be?
Hit the ball away.
Knocking the ball away.
Yeah. You said throw in. I would say throw in. Throw in is a by the rule. There's a rule you can quote that says that you cannot reach through the throw in boundary as a defensive player. So in my book, that one's going to be automatic. Everything else is going to have a small aspect of judgment. So I'll kind of walk you through them. So huddling during a free throw. According to the rule book, that's a delay. What if we got subs coming in? We haven't fully exchanged all the subs yet. So in that scenario, has the huddle created an actual delay to the game? Or are we not ready to go yet as officials? And so does that huddle actually have an effect? Right? Same thing with interfering with the ball following a goal. Okay, ball comes down and I tap it and it goes 6 inches out of bounds and kind of settles there. I've interfered with the ball after it's gone through the net, but has that had an actual effect, an actual delay on the game? Now, if I hit it and it goes 3 rows up in the bleachers, yeah, that's an easy call. I think it's a call all of us can make. But it's that middle scenario where, yes, I've interfered with it, but the offense picked the ball up immediately proceeded to a throw-in. Passing the ball to an official, not having the court ready immediately after the timeout. There are aspects of judgment there, right? If a kid doesn't pass you the ball, he takes 2 steps down the court and then throws it to you. Is there a delay? Did he do so because there's a timeout and he started walking towards his bench? So there's no actual delay that can happen because we're in a timeout anyway. There's water spilt on the court, and they start cleaning it up, but everyone's still trying to get into places. The officials aren't even in place yet, and by the time the officials are ready to go, the water's cleaned up. They've made our jobs harder by making these a little bit more subjective. But at the same time, it gives us a little bit of wiggle room to explain to opposing coaches why we didn't call something, why we didn't call it for the tiny little tap that moved the ball 6 inches, why we didn't call a delay for the water that was on the court that they had cleaned up by the time we were ready as officials to start the game. So be aware that there is judgment that's going to need to be made in these calls, and be ready to explain that judgment to a coach who disagrees with your, in most cases, no call. And also be ready to defend your calls, to say, nah, coach, we were waiting for you and you were still wiping that water up. It's a delay. Okay? Any questions there? I know there's a lot of judgment built into this one. So any scenarios that people want to throw out there that they might be concerned with? All right. 632A and 635B, I have no comment. They basically just defined how big the center circle is, because you can't move on to or off of the center circle or around the center circle during the jump ball procedure. They just gave you a distance that is now defined as 3 feet of the line. So you do with that what you will. 10.5.2. Coaches and other bench personnel do not need to be beckoned onto the court to attend to an injured player. This one seems like common sense to me. If a player's injured, they don't need to wait for us to say, yeah, that looks really bad, coach, you should come onto the court. I think that you're going to not go very far or have a good reputation with coaches if you're going to hand out a tee because they ran out on the court to help with an injured player. So just keep in mind they've codified this now. I think it matches what is the best judgment for this particular call, which is if there's an injured player, coach, trainer, assistant coach, they can come help that player without any beckoning onto the court. Situations where you might see this happen is if you've got an injured player behind the play and the coach thinks that they're injured enough that they want to immediately go deal with that player. Use your best judgment. I would not penalize the coach in that situation. I understand the ball's live, but if he or she in their judgment thinks that player needs help, needs attention, let's err on the side of safety, not on the side of razor thin rules interpretation. Okay?
So what if they're just doing it to manipulate the clock in that aspect? Stop game of play, stop anybody that has an advantage, or they're having the opposite team is having a huge run on them and they're using that to, oh, the person's injured, I'm gonna go 10.
I would respond in this way. When it comes to player safety, I'm not going to interpret any malintent. Player safety is key. Player safety is the most important thing out of all the rules, out of every aspect of basketball that we do. Player safety is the most important thing. So if a coach is doing something that is very obviously can be interpreted as being in player safety, I'm going to give them the freedom to do that. It may create a disadvantage, and I'm going to have to defend that to another coach. But if it's for the purpose of player safety, I think I can defend that. Okay? Anyone else have a different opinion on that? I think if you tell an opposing coach it's about player safety, that player seemed to be really hurt if the coach is going to come out, you might get that coach going away in a huff, but I don't think they're going to dock you for something like that.
I don't think we can err on the side of not stopping it. I mean, we had a playoff game last year where the kid cramped up probably 6 times in the second half. Could it have been for an advantage? Yeah. Rulebook doesn't support me if I don't stop it. And I think we got to err back on the fact that today's society we're going to get sued with anything that happens. If we don't stop anything, we're probably erring on the side that's wrong right away. I think with that, if he runs out there, I'm going to let the play go and let him score before I blow the whistle to kill it. Even if he runs out there, like I think we don't take away a possession that if they're already in the front court going to score and he's way down there, let the bucket go in, kill it, then stop it.
Yeah.
That or they bring it back.
Yeah. But the rules really don't. I mean, you're not gonna. If he's doing it on purpose, I would find it very hard to tee him because they could come back and say he's actually hurt. What if he actually is?
You'd get a lot of conversation about intent. How did you know what the coach intended to do? Yeah. And again, the rule is now written in a way that we don't have to make that decision, right? The coach does not need to be beckoned, which means we don't have to stop the game necessarily for them to attend to an injured player. So it frees us up. We don't have to penalize a coach in that scenario. Again, not that we would have in the past. Let's see, casebook 521C, contact a ball thrown from behind the three-point line with no chance to go in. This has been, I believe, an NFHS rules test question for quite a number of years, and it's a really weird scenario. But just imagine that you have an offensive player throwing a pass, and that pass gets deflected up, and they're throwing the pass from behind the three-point line. It gets deflected, and it goes into the basket. Previous rules interpretation was it doesn't matter whether it's a pass or a shot. If it was deflected by the defense, released behind the three-point line, you score a three-point field goal. They have changed that interpretation now, and again, put a little bit back on us to make judgment calls. We have to now judge whether that release of the ball was a try for goal or a pass. The other aspect of this is if it is a try for goal, it still has to have a chance to go in. So you will no longer have a situation where someone short arms a three and the defense goes up to rebound and deflects it and it goes into the hoop, and under the previous interpretation of the rules, that's a three-point field goal. Cleans up some aspects, makes it a little bit harder for us where we have to make judgment calls. So it cleans up those short-armed three-pointers where you don't have to worry about did it you have to interpret whether it had a legitimate chance to go in or not, but it makes it more difficult because you have to make a determination between what is a pass and what is a shot attempt with a chance to go in. Getting your casebook for that one, there's quite a bit of discussion out there, but any questions on that last one? I know it's a little bit weird, but I want to point it out because that question has been on the NFHS rules test. I feel like 5 out of the last 6 years about whether you would score this as a 2-point or a 3-point field goal. All right, some additional rules clarifications. I believe these are just in the casebook. Newer officials out there, and even our veteran officials, dive into your casebooks. There's a lot of rule interpretation that happens in the casebook that informs and builds off of the rules in the rule book, but you may not have made that determination from the way the rules are written. This is where when they don't want to change hard language, they get into comments or situations, interpretations that live in the casebook. So if you have time and you wanna work in the book to get better, I highly recommend that you spend time in the casebook rather than just reading through your rule book. So clarifications that have come down: continuous motion. There, at all levels of the game, there is a drive to better define what is continuous motion and open up more scoring opportunities. So what we have here is 411.2. You can look it up in your casebook if you have it. It is defining that a player who's pivoting or stepping is considered to have begun the try attempt. This builds off of, for those of you that know Greg Blum, he has a philosophy with continuous motion, which is you're either a dribbler or you're a shooter. If you're driving towards the basket and you've picked up your dribble, there ain't nothing you're going to do with that ball except shoot it. So this builds off of that by saying if I picked up my dribble and I am pivoting in a direction and I get fouled and then I continue that motion towards the basket, or I haven't placed that pivot foot down, we want to give them a wider interval to continue that motion and attempt to score a basket. So a step, a pivot that's in progress, we want to let them continue that motion, and if it turns into a shot, we're going to interpret that as having begun the shot attempt. So if a player has picked up the ball, they're no longer a dribbler, and they get fouled and they turn and go up, even if they hadn't started that turn yet, but they're sort of starting to pivot, starting to shift their weight, we want to judge that in a more generous fashion for the inclusion of continuous motion. Now, we're not going to start to get into NBA territory where we've got many multiples of steps. Just err on the side of if they're in some type of motion and they can turn that motion into a shot towards the basket, you're going to rule continuous motion. 412, the throw-in team remains in control of the ball until player control is established on the court. This has to do with inadvertent whistles. So in a situation where a throw-in has ended, say because it's deflected by the defense, throw-in has ended in that scenario, but the ball is still loose. If for whatever reason we have an inadvertent whistle, our point of interruption is going to be the throw-in team retains possession, and we're going to go to one of our designated spot throw-ins. So just keep that in mind. They thought it relevant to put in the casebook, so something probably happened in a playoff game somewhere that got run up the chain through state associations, and that's why they're making these clarifications. 415, I highly recommend that everyone read this one and that really every coach read this. Reinforcing which actions do and do not constitute a dribble. So what is the definition that starts a dribble? What is our rule book definition for an act that starts a dribble?
Pushing the ball to the ground.
Pushing the ball towards the ground. You also say batting the ball towards the ground. Generally speaking, a forceful direction of the ball towards the ground with your hand. So that is what starts a dribble. Everything else is not a dribble. Okay? So a ball that goes up, not a dribble. A ball that's fumbled, not a dribble. Rebounding action where they jump up and they tip it, and really athletic kid tips it away and then runs after the ball and picks it up and continues down the court. That's not the start of a dribble. A dribble is only action where they forcibly push the ball or bat the ball down towards the ground. So just reinforce those actions. You get a coach, one or two coaches every year who are upset because a player fumbled the ball on a fast break and they were able to cover a large amount of distance without ever actually dribbling the ball. It's because they never did anything that started a dribble and they never possessed the ball. So get in there, get in your head, remember what those things are that are going to cause a dribble to start and what things are not considered the start of a dribble. Both hands are not required to cause a held ball. No comment. They thought that needed to be in there. I don't know. Couple more here. Division line is a part of the backcourt for both teams. So this is relevant, Thomas, in the NCAA rule set, but in the high school rule set, division line is part of the backcourt. You step on the division line. After the ball's been in the front court as the offensive team, that is a backcourt violation, and we're going to go to the 28-foot mark in the front court. The reason I say for both teams is there's a little, like it's a nice little loophole here. The division line's always in the backcourt. The division line is never going to be in a team's front court. Delay returning to the court, team technical. This is a situation I've never encountered before. But it's just reminding everyone that after a timeout, all the players have to return to the court at roughly the same time. You can't leave one player on the sideline kind of hiding out or hiding behind the coach or even just sitting on the bench because they thought they weren't in. If you have a situation where you don't have all 5 players return to the court and play is ready to resume, that player who's now off the court, they're not really a legal player. They can rejoin the game because they are a player in the book, but they definitely cannot gain an advantage. So the case plays that you'll read are 4 players return to the court, play begins, one of those players steals the ball, and then his teammate pops out by the other basket and they throw a cherry pick pass. Nope, that's a technical foul. Things that we can do to make sure this does not happen. Count our players. Try not to even start the play unless you know you've got that 5th player on the court. It's always best to start with clean hands. If you tell the coach you only got 4 and he just like gives you the deer in the headlights look, okay, then you did your best to try and have a clean play happen, and you might end up in this scenario. This most likely is going to happen in your resumption of play procedures where you've had your first horn, you've had your second horn, you've blown the whistle at the coach, you tell them let's go, and then we're going to go put the ball in. So that's a situation where this is likely to happen. I don't think it's super common. If you've had it happen and you've enforced it correctly, good for you. That's a tough one to get right. Last one here for rules clarifications. This is an update to our mechanics. On free throws, I wrote lead, that should say trail. The trail is going to assist with lane activity on free throws. So in the NFHS mechanics, our trail is going to occupy what position on the court? Roughly speaking, they're going to be on or around 28-foot mark, glued to the sideline. You still have primary responsibility of all the players above the 3-point line, but you're going to provide help on anything that happens in the lane. Make it obvious, right? You want to see the player, stepped in a second before the shot went up, and your lead or your center official, they were taking a nap or they were looking somewhere else and they didn't see it. Those are the situations where you're going to want to come in and help out on those plays. Don't don't step on your partner's toes. Make them obvious. Leave the marginal ones for them to call. They can live and die on it. You don't want to be making that call from, you know, that distance away, from 30 feet away. All right. Points of emphasis. Contact on the ball handler. It seems like every year, every other year, we've got points of emphasis about contact. It's not about hand checks this year. So good on us. We've been calling enough hand checks that they don't want us focusing on that anymore. But again, we want to have that continued focus on maintaining freedom of movement for the ball handlers. Scoring it's where the game's going. They don't want to lock down scoring opportunities by giving too much freedom to the defense. So they want us to continue to penalize illegal acts by the defense and maintain that freedom of movement for the offense. Defenders shouldn't use their hips, their torso. So really, reading between the lines, what they're looking for here is they're looking for body positioning now. We got away from hand checks. We got away from players putting a hand, redirecting, pushing. Now they want us to focus on the legal guarding position. So how does a defender obtain a legal guarding position? What are the criteria laid out in our rule book?
Feet on the floor, torso facing.
Both feet on the floor, torso facing their opponent. In this case, we're going to talk about them facing the ball handler. That's how they that's how they obtain legal guarding position. How do they maintain legal guarding position? What can they do once they've obtained that legal position?
Moving with their feet.
Move with their feet? How specifically can they move?
Laterally or obliquely.
Laterally or obliquely. Couple of weird words that they've chosen for not being super well defined in the rule book. My interpretation is that it is in relation to the court, so they can maintain a legal position by going sideline to sideline or moving backwards towards the goal or the end line that they are defending. That is the best interpretation I found of what is lateral and oblique. Tim, you're giving me a weird, and I have a sneaking suspicion of what you're gonna throw out there.
Yeah, I mean, just based on math and angles and geometry, that creates a situation where I could be moving laterally to the end line, but be moving towards a ball carrier, giving them less time to react to whatever I'm doing.
Yes, you're 100% correct. And that's why there is a second part of that rule. You can move laterally or obliquely, provided that it is not towards the opponent with contact. So you can move laterally, but if you're closing the distance to the opponent and make contact, that is not maintaining legal guarding position. So in a scenario where the ball handler is moving, yes, you can move laterally, but if you can't do so without making contact, it's not a legal movement. So that tends to create more of a lateral or oblique that is relative to the ball handler, which I think is what you were getting at. The problem is that the rule book doesn't have a definition there. It doesn't have a mechanogram that tells you what it means for the defender to move lateral or move obliquely. They're just really bad words for a bunch of basketball officials to interpret.
Can it be simplified in the fact that the defense can never make contact?
They can make incidental contact.
Yeah?
Right, but not, you're closing that gap down and you overstep it and make contact. Defense can't do that. But the defense has the right to close that gap down short of making contact.
Yeah, that's a fair interpretation, a fair set of standards to apply there.
So doesn't the onus for the defense was after the offensive player got their head and shoulders past the torso of the defender?
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes the defender's responsibility to avoid contact, right? If you can move laterally and keep the offensive player centered inside your frame, then it's the offense's responsibility to avoid contact with the defender.
Yeah.
Right? But if they get that head and shoulders outside the frame of the defender and then contact occurs, it's on the defender at that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that interpretation. that you have to, those are the ways in which you can move, but you need to obtain that space without creating any contact.
Basically what I was gonna say, just keeping your distance.
Yeah.
No matter how far you go, this way, that way, anyway, if you got your legal guarding positions, and the distance, then you'll get that 5-7 call. That's what that 5-7.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we say we have a scenario where the offensive player is going down, the defensive player is trying to catch up. Offensive player turns his head around, sees where he is, dribbles over to make sure, so the defensive runs into him.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you call that?
So I would fall back on sort of the framework that Nick defined, which is if the offensive player is at least head and shoulders past the defender, which I would agree in your case he is, then the responsibility of contact falls on the defensive player. So the offensive player has gained a position that is ahead. So the defender can still move laterally and obliquely. They can still move towards their end line, but they now need to do it without
What I'm saying
making
is
contact.
the offensive player sees he's coming and then moves more, so the defensive player doesn't have a chance to get out of the way. It does it deliberately. So
I think that's the prerogative, that's the right that the offensive player has earned by obtaining the position on the court that they have obtained.
The defender is not in legal guarding position because he's trailing the offensive player, so it's the defender's responsibility to avoid the contact.
Yeah, and you feel bad about it, if you got a defender who's trailing and you have an offensive player who decides to check up. It's the way the rules are.
That's
right?
smart basketball.
Yeah. And defenders, they're smart as well. They'll figure out that it's not worth chasing that play. They're far enough behind, nothing's going to happen. So let that one go. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of contact we might see. In particular, this rule is trying to deal with, because I think we're all good enough that we can call the 100%ers. We can call the really obvious where a defender, gets there late. It's a hip. They send the ball handler sprawling. Those are the easy one to get. What type of contact is going to fall into this bucket where they really want us to focus and change the way that we're officiating to improve the game? Any thoughts, Tim?
I think it's kind of like what Nick was talking about. You're at the top of the 3-point line. You have a stationary dribbler with a legal guard inside the semicircle, and that ball carrier dribbler starts to drive, and the defender slides laterally. Right? If the dribbler gets his head, shoulders past the defender, and the defender is still gently nudging him sideways, is throwing him off his direct path to the basket.
Yep.
That's the disadvantage that's created here.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key examples of what they're going to be looking for here. That contact's going to look like, it's not going to look like much, because it's going to be hip on hip. It's going to be me as a defender using this hip to control, and so I'm almost going to I'm going to let the ball handler come onto this hip, and then I'm going to move with him, and I'm maybe going to move off to the corner to redirect him using that hip. But I have not maintained a legal guarding position. It's not big contact, but it is having an effect on the ball handler's freedom of movement. To Tim's example, that ball handler wants to turn, go down the lane line, and get to the hoop, and they're being redirected out towards the 3-point line. Those are the things that we've got to look for here. It's going to be contact that's outside of that main frame of the torso. It's going to be occurring on the hips. It's going to be occurring on the torso. It's going to be that leg that's stuck just a little bit too far out. That's going to trip up, redirect, affect the ball handler's freedom of movement. That's where we need to focus our efforts in this upcoming season to help address this. And again, don't forget about hand checks. I don't want to see hand checks in the point of emphasis next year. Intentional fouls, make sure that we're judging the act of the foul itself. You can have significant contact that doesn't arise to the level of an intentional foul. You can also have marginal contact, that definitely is an intentional foul because of the type of contact. So make sure that we're judging the act of the foul, that we are comparing it to that framework of what constitutes an intentional foul and ruling appropriately. The goal here is to instruct the players to commit. They use the term legal fouls. I'm not sure that a foul can be legal per the rule set, but they want to, I replace it with the term common fouls. We want them to commit common fouls. We don't want players committing intentional fouls. And we as officials, we have that ability to tell a player, hey, you were close. I need you, don't go through his back, try and get to the ball, do something for me. A lot of players are really, really receptive to that, and they'll clean up. You tell them that you're looking for an intentional foul, and it's like, a light switch goes off in their head, and they know exactly how they want to foul so that it looks legitimate. Any questions on the contact portion of our points of emphasis? All right, next point of emphasis, bench decorum, communication, and player altercations. They kind of mush together several different aspects here. But that first one, this is one of the most difficult aspects of officiating basketball. Figuring out how to communicate, how to control coaches. We have almost an inbuilt adversarial relationship with coaches, and so it's very difficult. We sometimes stand in the way of what the coach wants, and so it can make it difficult to interact with the coach and to control their behavior, and by extension the behavior of their assistant coaches, their bench personnel, and their players on the court. Really, really important. We need to use our tools. A great official always used to tell me that there's 3 steps to dealing with a coach that is doing something you don't want them to do. You ask them to stop, you tell them to stop, and then you enforce the rules. So if it's something that's a problem but it's not major, we definitely want to have that open level of communication. Tell coach, Coach, I heard you the first time. We can stop discussing it now. Please stop discussing it. Go back down a second time. Coach, we're done talking about it. That escalation, you're no longer asking them to stop. You're telling them, this is the way it is. We are going to stop. After that, you've got your enforcement, right? We have a warning for coach and team conduct, and we have a technical foul. Do not be afraid to use those. Do not be afraid to skip a step if the conduct warrants it. This applies to the coach. This applies to all of the assistant coaches. This applies to the players on the court. One thing that we can do potentially, this is really tough. This is advanced level stuff. I'm no good at it, but I know a lot of officials who are. If the coach is a problem, see if you have an assistant coach who can help you out. Maybe during a timeout, you got a timeout and there's 9 assistant coaches standing outside of the circle. Just mosey on up to one and be like, hey, can you just give me a hand? Have your coach just stay in his box. He's getting out too much. Coaches are really focused on what's going on in the game. They have assistant coaches to think about those things outside of the game. Conversely, you can talk to the coach if an assistant is being a problem. If you got an assistant coach who's just jawing at you every time, up and down the court, go to the coach and say, Coach, your assistant can't talk to me. A good coach is going to control that because he doesn't want to lose his box or something that he didn't do. Have those things in your back pocket. Be careful about how you use them. Some coaches are not going to like you talking to one of their assistants during a timeout. Be careful how you use them, but keep them in your back pocket. They are a really, really good tool to help us control the game, control the coaches, control behavior. One last thing I want to remind everyone on with this is for conduct, there's one warning. You get one warning for the coach is misbehaving, the bench is misbehaving, the assistants are misbehaving. One warning for conduct. It's not a warning for every single player or every single, it's not one warning for head coaches and a different warning for assistant coaches and a different warning for bench personnel. Coach is responsible for all of that. So you get one bench conduct warning. After that, if they continue or if they do something else that is over the line, you're going to a technical foul. Ensure your communication with coaches is professional and that it has a purpose. I'm not a big fan of talking to the coach about, especially engaging the coach, asking, wow, you guys really beat up on Middleton last weekend. How was that game? Your best player out there, you scored 30. I don't like talking with coaches that way. I know some officials do, and for some officials it makes them really comfortable. I like to keep the contact with the coaches professional. It's about the game that's happening on the court, and I want to make sure it has a purpose. I'm not checking in with the coach, being like, Coach, how you doing? We miss any calls? What are you going to do? What's going on? What are you guys going to do in the second half? Make sure it has a purpose that serves the game. Coaches are allowed to, we always say this, we reiterate this, they're allowed to ask questions, and we want to answer questions. We don't want to be answering comments. We don't want to be, if a coach is, 6 fouls to 2, 6 fouls to 2, that doesn't need a response. There's nothing you can say that's going to make that coach be in a better mood. So just don't respond. Now, if he asks a question, if he says, that foul on my player, what did he do wrong? It's a legitimate question. Communicate. Use your rules knowledge to answer rules questions. You're going to give yourself a lot of credit in the coach's mind if you can say, Coach, there was contact, but your player was not there in time, that you hadn't obtained a legal guarding position. That's why it was a block. Use your rules words. Use your rules knowledge. It will go a long way. You might get the call wrong, but if you can explain what you interpreted the play to be, most coaches are going to accept that and move on. Coaches on the floor. So this is the second warning that you can issue. A coach that's pushing his box too far. You can issue a warning. That is a separate warning from the bench conduct. It's a separate line item in the rule. It's really important. Coaches on the floor are no good during live play. It's our safety, it's the player's safety, and especially it helps preserve fairness. First half especially, where that coach, his team is on defense. If he's crowding the floor, that is less space than that the offense has to run in. So we want to make sure that we're using our tools, enforcing those limits. Again, this is, a scenario where you could ask an assistant coach, be like, hey, just remind him he's got to keep off the court. He's got to stay within his limits. Now, I give the coach a little bit more, I don't see maybe the harm if they're a step above the box in the first half because their team's on offense. I might not enforce it right away. I'm going to give them a little bit of leniency, but I am going to talk to them about it. Let the coach know that, hey, I'm watching that. You're pushing it a little bit too far. Again, that ask, tell, enforce mentality. We are empowered by the rules to, the first time it happens, put a warning in the book, but it does not do the best for our credibility to go straight to the warning. If we can work with the coach, if we can get him or her to modify their behavior, then it prevents the need for any further enforcement. Last one on here is player altercations. This is not really, in the points of emphasis, it's not for us. This is really for the coaches. It talks about coaches talking with their assistants, knowing who's going to stop who from doing what during a fight. So all we need to know is, again, if there's a fight that's happening or going to happen, as officials, I say it's always best for us to step back. We do not need to involve ourselves with breaking up a fight on the court. My fellow officials who are involved in education, they might say differently based on their day job. But I always, if it's going to be a fight, if it's going to be something like that, step back, because our role then is to observe, is to understand what's happening so that we can adjudicate the play correctly. If I knock on wood, I hope none of you have to have a fight happen in one of your games, but if you show up on film and you did everything exactly correctly, like your clip's going to get shared all throughout the state, and everyone's going to be talking about what an amazing job you did. And the first thing that we can do to help that happen for us is to step back and observe what's going on. Okay? How do you feel about that, Nick?
I'm just gonna say, I think anybody who's never had one, it sounds easy to talk about it, but when you have 15 players on the court and trying to figure out who came from where,
it's
and
tough.
who is or isn't on the court, it's until you've had it happen, even if it doesn't turn into a fight, it's something you can talk about all you want, but I don't think until it happens you're really prepared for it.
Yep. Do your best. We don't have replay cameras like they have in Division I, where they can sit there for 10 minutes and break it down and get everything exactly correctly. Just step back and do your best. All right. We can't escape it. I did like 3 presentations on this last year, faking being fouled. It's a point of emphasis because I think it's working, and they want us to continue to focus on this to remove action from the game that we all know does not make the game better. Continue to use the rules, continue to use the mechanics. There's a lot of variability in how faking being fouled needs to be observed, enforced, and adjudicated. We'll go through some of the examples here on the next few slides. But there is a lot of variety there. So get yourself into the case book. Find online resources. The NFHS publishes a lot of resources on faking being fouled, the ways to correctly enforce that stuff. The 3 major categories, and I suspect every year we're going to focus more and more on the things that are being a problem for the game. What they've identified is the head bob. So that's our ball handler trying to create the perception of contact, typically by throwing the head back a little bit. Sometimes they throw the shoulders back. That's faking being fouled. Faking being fouled in the act of shooting. So this is the shooter goes up, their feet come down the floor, they're trying to draw contact, and they crumple into a mess on the floor, or they come down and then they throw themselves back to try to create the perception that contact has occurred. And the last one is defensive player falls to the floor. So this is our classic, it goes into block charge situations, and then just defenders trying to draw that contact on a ball handler. Those are the ones that they've identified that are still a problem, and so that's where we need to put our focus in the coming year. Ensure that we are adjudicating the plays correctly. So each one of those scenarios I talked about has a different adjudication, has a different way of dealing with the play, reporting it, and moving on. So our first scenario is Team A has team control. They are not in the act of shooting, and the ball handler makes a head bob. So in this scenario where Team A has control, they are responsible for faking being fouled, and there's no shot attempt. We are stopping play immediately. This is the only time that we stop play immediately. Signal 15, that's our flop signal. What I've been told is it's a 1-2, so it's 1-2, that's your flop. And then we're going to administer, so that's going to be reporting the faking being fouled. Remember, faking being fouled is not reported on a player, it is a team warning. So you do not even need to say to the table who the faking being fouled is. You should know who it's on so that you can tell the coach, because the coach is certainly going to ask the question if it's not super obvious. But if you're going to go to the table and you say faking being fouled, blue, warning, put it in the book. Our second scenario, this is the shooting scenario. I am going to caveat this one. This is pending feedback from the WIAA. So this right now, this is the NFHS approved procedure. It has updated from last year. The rules were slightly different. What they wanted us to do was slightly different last year. They're going more, the NFHS is going more in the direction of the WIAA. I'm just waiting on a couple of clarifying points from Chad, and I'll get to those in the middle section there. So this is Team A, has team control, and someone is in the act of shooting, and they fake being fouled. Our first step in that scenario is not to stop play. It's really, really hard. I made the mistake last year of stopping play when I shouldn't have for faking being fouled. I'm sure that all of us have probably made that mistake, so continue to focus on that. Our first step here is actually going to be the signal. So if we see a shooter go up, come down, and they crumple with no contact, first thing we're doing is we're communicating, we're showing faking being fouled. This was different last year. The NFHS wanted us to blow it dead immediately. They've moved away from that. The WIAA always wanted us to wait. So we're going to signal, and then we're going to stop the play once one of those four things happens. So the try is successful, stop play. Defense team gains control of the ball, either on a rebound or a loose ball, stop play. The offense team gains control but does not immediately attempt to score. This is what's different right now between NFHS and WIAA. The NFHS wants you to let the offense, if they're going to try and shoot a putback or something, or tap, they want you to wait. They want you to let the action continue. The point of emphasis that they have is that the faking being fouled is an interrupter, and so we want to at least let the action go to its natural conclusion before we have enforcement associated with that penalty. So if it's a situation where there's a rebound, offense gets it, and a player's immediately going up for a putback, per NFHS, we are supposed to hold that whistle. For the WIAA, the guidance we had last year, we would have hit the whistle as soon as there was a rebound. So there's some disagreement. When I get clarification on that, I will share with everyone to make sure that we're enforcing this the way that our state wants it enforced. And then the last scenario is any other dead ball. So if there was a rebounding foul, anything like that, we're going to stop play. And then just like last time, we're going to report the faking being fouled, and resume play in whatever way we need to resume play. And the last one, this is the defense fakes being fouled. Team A has team control. Again, the first thing we're going to do is signal 15, communicate to everyone that we have faking being fouled. Play is going to continue until Team A scores, Team B gets the ball, or we have a dead ball. Then we'll stop play, administer, and resume play. I want to share a play that kind of encapsulates almost all of those things in one play. It's kind of amazing. And we'll just play this through, and we'll kind of critique it a little bit and talk about what this crew did really, really well. Go ahead and stop there. What did the crew do really well, especially as it pertains to the enforcement and the adjudication of faking being fouled? They let it play on after the first faking, right? Our first faking being fouled, probably one of the worst I've seen. So we have that one called. And then watch the action in the left-hand corner. So we had two on one play. And I will give all the credit to this crew. That's Rich Fraunheiser, that's Tim, and that is Jeremy. They got the sequencing 100% correct. Our first scenario was defensive faking being fouled. We had our signal, and then we withheld the whistle. We let play develop. We let it continue. And if you notice, at no point do we have defensive control maintained. Second one, again, credit to Tim. Took a shooter up, shooter down, obviously faking being fouled. He didn't prematurely hit the whistle. He gave his signal. He waited for a rebound to occur. He was following the WIAA guidance on this. As soon as we had the rebound occur, stops play. That is exactly the right enforcement for this play. Tim, you guys reported both, right? Let's run through a couple of hypotheticals here. So let's assume that both teams had already been hit with a warning for faking being fouled. How does our enforcement change here? How does our adjudication change? So say this is the second faking being fouled for both teams. Anyone want to venture a guess of order of operations, Tim?
Well, I think you just said it. It's the order in which everything occurred. So the defensive faking being fouled happened first. So we give White 2 free throws with the lane lines cleared. Then we have White faking being fouled. So we give the dark team 2 free throws with the lane line cleared.
Yep.
And then we go point of interruption.
Do you think we would go point of interruption?
Maybe that's the wrong word, but we resume play from the free throws, and I would give the ball back to whoever shot second, the dark team, I believe.
Okay, so yeah, so we wouldn't necessarily go point of interruption. We would continue on from the second set of technical free throws, which is going to be black gaining possession of the ball. Yeah. Does anyone want to venture a guess? This is in the rule book. This is a defined term in the rule book. Does anyone want to venture a guess of what the actual name of this penalty is? It is defined in the rule book. Yes. This is a false double technical foul because the technical fouls occurred by different team, but they didn't occur with the 2 players against each other. And they were also, there's other verbiage in there, but this squarely fits in a false double technical foul. If you know that, you know immediately how to resume play. That is the only reason I would tell you that you need to get into the rule book and know what a simultaneous foul is, what a multiple, false double. Know what those are just for the purposes of resumption of play. Other than that, you don't actually need to, you don't need to tell coaches that it's a false double technical foul, blah, 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 blah. You just need to know that in that scenario, you're going to shoot the penalty for one foul, you're going to shoot the penalty for another foul, and then you're going to continue from the enforcement after that second technical foul. Does anyone have any critiques? I'll open it up. Tim was kind enough to take some critiques on this, of what we might be able to do better on this play to improve our credibility, to improve how we're perceived.
So I can tell you this is the opening round of the playoffs, and me personally, when something unexpected happens, my signals get wild. So that's not a question of me being exuberant at the call. It's just me being caught by surprise by it, and that's just my nature and everything that I do.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fair. We've all been in the scenario where you make just an absolute banger of a call, and I mean, sometimes I feel like the guys in the NCAA D1 that they get paid because of those kind of embellishments. But it is important. It's important that we rise to the level of the game, but not rise above the game. It's a bit of a cliche, but no one pays to see the officials. And I want to be able to leave every game with everyone sort of forgetting that I was even there. So working on your signals and working on that demeanor to just keep things a little bit, like I said, you and I talked about this, by keeping it a little bit calmer. Officials that I admire, it's just something super matter of fact. Same thing with technical fouls. Your technical fouls don't need to be a big gator chop. It's just a call like every other call. We wouldn't get super, fancy with our travel calls. We don't need to get super fancy with our flop calls. Just communicate it in a slow, simple way. And what it also does is it helps you as an official slow down. If your mechanics are slow, then your thought processes are slow, and it helps you think about what am I doing next, which is really important in a case where you called 2 faking being fouls on 1 possession. The other thing that I'm going to give Tim a huge amount of credit for here, after he reports this foul, or this faking being fouled, we get our reporting, we pick up our point of interruption. He's talking to one coach, making sure that he understands this is what happened, A, B, C happened, that's why we're inbounding the ball, we're inbounding it, and he goes down the court. He talks to the other coach as well. Just make sure, that gets back to that idea, the bench decorum and the communication, using that rules language and speaking to them in a professional way so that they understand, hey, a weird thing happened, you might be a little bit up here because you think your team can benefit, and I'm just going to make sure that you understand what we have to do. So I'm going to give you a lot of credit for that, Tim. That's excellent coach communication.
These fouls of 11 Zion Ellis Wilkinson is 4.
Did they?
All 3 did the
Because I feel like I'm getting a lot of pushback.
And the Burgholders, number 3.
You're only supposed to call the things that are in your zone, which I get. But
Do we have multiple signals?
I saw the center. I didn't see it.
I think
Just more the lead most of the time anyway.
We'll take offense to the song that first round playoff game. You're not going to lose anything by both having it there.
Yeah.
You can tell Jeremy to keep his eyes off the fucking ball.
And what I would probably say in this particular play, the timing of Rich's signal, it's a tad slow. So I'm not surprised, Tim, that eventually you get on top of that. And to an extent, probably it's because it surprised Rich. That was the most egregious faking being fouled. I think we probably could have supported calling that a technical before faking being fouled was a thing, because that was bad. And again, when those things catch us off guard, our brains shut off for a second. You're like, wait, what did I just see? The one that you got, Tim, is we see a lot of that in high school basketball, and so that one probably processed a lot quicker for you. So I'm not surprised that Rich was a little bit delayed, that you picked it up. I agree with Taylor. Lead needs to stay away from this big time. You can rib each other in the locker room afterward, being like, wow, you guys took forever to call that one, didn't you? But as a lead official, I think we definitely need to stay off of that.
Andrew, how's that going to change now when you said you're waiting for the
So that's actually a really good question for this particular play, because at the point that Tim blows it dead, there is an argument to be made that the offense has secured a rebound and is looking to immediately score. So let's roll this back. That's a dribble towards the basket. He's gathering. The way the NFHS has put it in the points of emphasis, we would let this continue. We would not stop this play. Like I said, Tim did it the way the WIA wants us to do it, and I'm trying to get clarification on this exact point. So this play may have a different enforcement depending on what I hear back from the state.
If it's the second offense on the offense, do we kill it right away?
If it's 2 offenses on the offense in the same possession.
Just in the same possession?
Oh, you're talking about if it's just their second warning.
Yeah.
Or I should say the technical foul. No, we do not kill it right away. we do let the play. So the enforcement, the chevrons that I went through, the steps that I went through, those are the same no matter if it's the warning or if it's going to be the technical foul enforcement. They don't want us overthinking that and immediately blowing the play dead because we think it's going to be a technical foul. I won't really spend any time on this last slide. I'll include this in the presentation. This is some of the stuff I went through last year when talking about how to assess faking being fouled, how to officiate it. Again, going back to some of our kind of core philosophies of what makes us good officials, officiating the defense, watching the play start, develop, finish, and then decide what our enforcement, what our call is going to be. Those are really critical. Continue to practice those things. They're going to help you get really good at faking being fouled. If you see that play go all the way through, you're going to say, I know where the defense was. I know what the offensive player did. I saw what the reaction was from the offensive player. There was no contact. Decide that we have faking being fouled. Work through that. Think about that when you're on the court. Continue to practice that. The rules exam and the basketball video are both out. I know Chad sent an email about the video. I don't think there's been any communication about the test, but the test is up there on the WA website. They are important for playoff consideration and advancement. Rules 2 will come out later in the year. This is the only reminder I'm going to give you. Keep your schedule up to date on the WA Official Center. Have a picture in there. They continue to harp on that. Have a semi-professional picture. Next meeting is going to be next Tuesday here again in the Wanakee High School Library, 6:30 p.m. Submit topics for discussion, submit clips if you have them. I'm going to go through our CBOA provided materials. We'll probably cover trail positioning and continuous motion. But if there are additional topics, this is the preseason time. This is the time for us to put in the work, to lay the groundwork, the bricks that we're going to build off of through the entire year. So I want to make sure this is useful to you guys. If there's something that you want to really work on this year and you want it covered in depth as a topic, please let me know. Send me an email. I've got a form out there where you can submit it so that we can make this discussion as useful to everyone as it possibly can. Otherwise, that's everything I got for today. Thank you everyone for coming out, and have a good night.